When I discovered that my wife had cheated on me twice and was planning to do it again, I was completely devastated. I read about all the emotions that overwhelm a person when they realize that the marriage they thought was strong and reliable has turned into a fiction. The emotions engulfed me like Hurricane Katrina flooded New Orleans. My dam broke, and the waters rushed in and swallowed everything that I was and everything that was my wife. Yes, I almost cried because of this. When the emotional tide subsided, there was nothing recognizable left in my marriage. Everything disappeared. Trust disappeared. Respect disappeared. Admiration disappeared. Care disappeared. Sexual attraction disappeared. Love left. Have you seen the photos of the aftermath of a hurricane? There's no place you could recognize, nowhere you could come and start rebuilding what was lost. It's just devastation, and it's so overwhelming that you give up and leave. This is what I would like to do with my marriage. I would give up and leave. There was nothing worth trying to save. My wife took our life and twisted it until everything turned into a pile of unrecognizable garbage. It was all over. Susie and I had a fight. It wasn't an unusual fight. We had those from time to time, like most married couples, but this one ended very badly. Susie tried to convince me to renovate our living room. She said the furniture was outdated, she was tired of it, and she wanted to redo the room and change the atmosphere. I explained as clearly as possible that the furniture wasn't old. It was only 2 years old. It cost a lot of money, and I wasn't going to spend such a large sum on new furniture. She kept telling me that she was tired of it and she wanted something new. Maybe I made a mistake and escalated the argument when I said, "I guess I'm tired of you too, right? You just want to go and sleep with someone else because you're sick of me? Why can't you just be happy with what you have?" She retorted sarcastically, "Well, maybe I should go sleep with someone else. Then maybe you'd realize what you had and what you could lose." Of course, I didn't let that slide and shouted back, "Well, you decide what you want from life, Susie, and just go for it. But don't expect me to be here waiting for you when you come back." Then she hit a nerve when she said, "Maybe I should have married Phil instead of you. Maybe he wouldn't have been such a cheap bastard like you." That hit me like a red flag to a bull. I literally yelled at her, "Get lost and go sleep with him. I never want to hear his name mentioned again. And you're not buying new furniture, no matter what you do or say." End of discussion. I stormed out of the house and went to the club to have a couple of beers. I was furious, and I needed time to cool off before I spoke to her again. Phil had always been my main rival. He was the golden boy in our community. Everything he touched turned to gold, except for one thing. He had his eyes on my wife years ago, but she was in love and married me, not him. They dated a few times during a brief period when we were separated. He pursued her and almost succeeded, but not quite. She did marry me in the end. I worked hard at my job and earned a very respectable living. Actually, more than respectable. Phil just looked at a project, and it started making money for him. I'd been in business for many years, and my reputation steadily grew due to hard work and honesty. But everyone just assumed Phil was the trustworthy, authoritative figure. He never had to prove anything about himself. Did I envy his successful life? No, I didn't envy his business position. I was raised to work hard, be honest and reliable, and I would never envy someone's success. But I was a little sensitive, jealous, when it came to Susie. I'll always remember that she dated him, that he pursued her. It was about 2 hours later, around 9 in the evening, when my mobile phone rang. I looked at the number. It was my home phone. I decided to send the call to voicemail rather than talk to my wife at that moment because I was still quite worked up, and on top of that, I had a few beers in me and thought I might say something unpleasant that I'd regret later. Sometime later, I listened to her message. "Larry, I called to say that I regret what I said earlier. I realize that this may not be enough for you to answer my call, because you must have seen that it's me calling. Since you won't be home soon, I think I'll just go out for a while on my own. See you later." That was really not enough. I had just started to calm down after our argument, but now I was angry again. I grabbed another beer and downed it in a couple of minutes, then went to look for her. I checked all the bar parking lots in town and didn't see her car. Eventually, I thought maybe she had left with someone familiar, so I went to her best friend Patty's house, and of course, her car was parked in front of the house. I approached the front door and knocked. About a minute later, Dave, Patty's husband, came to the door and asked me, "How are you doing, Larry? I heard you and Susie had a bit of a spat today. They're not here. They decided to go bar hopping tonight." "Well, Dave, I didn't see Susie's car at the bars, so I thought maybe she was here with Patty. Could you tell me what car your wife drives so I can go and look for them?" "Tonight she's in the excursion. I think they were planning to start at the Bachelor's, then eventually come back here," he added. I went out and drove straight to the Bachelor's, and sure enough, Patty's excursion was in the parking lot. I debated going straight inside to confront Susie face to face, but I was still a bit buzzed from the beers I had, and I thought maybe it would be better if I just sat in the car for a bit and sobered up before we drank again. A few minutes past 11, they came out, got into Patty's car, and drove off the lot. I followed them at a safe distance, and as Dave said, they pulled up to the downhill bar and went inside. I sat in the parking lot again for a while, just watching. I figured it wouldn't be long before they headed to the next place, and I was right. At exactly midnight, they drove to the place that I assumed would be the next and final stop before heading back. It was a pub and a hotel, and when midnight struck, Patty walked out of the hotel, got into her car, and drove away. What the hell is going on? I asked myself. How wrong was Susie to behave like this, staying here? Was she planning to do something foolish? I knew I had to find out. I grabbed a baseball cap and a t-shirt from my team out of the trunk and put them on for some disguise. I wasn't completely sober yet, so my disguise wasn't perfect. You see, my name was on the shirt. However, I didn't think anyone would pay that much attention to it, so I figured it was better than no disguise at all. A few minutes later, I sneaked into the pub and found a secluded spot where I could watch what was happening. That's when I saw Susie with Phil. Yes, she was with Phil. They were sitting at a table against the back wall of the bar, as far away from the entrance as possible. I noticed that there was an empty booth right behind Susie, so I made my way there as stealthily as I could. However, I didn't need to worry. They were so engrossed in their conversation that they wouldn't have noticed if a water buffalo had snuck into that booth. From where I sat, I could hear their entire conversation, except for a couple of times when he, presumably, leaned in to kiss her and whisper something. "Thanks for coming, Phil. I didn't want to keep Patty all night," she said. Phil responded, "Not a problem at all. You know, I find it amusing when you and Larry have disagreements. It's one of those rare occasions when you let me feel closer to you. Back when you two separated 7 years ago, I had the chance to be intimate with you for a while, and twice even after you got married. If you'd like, I'd be more than willing to share that connection again tonight, as a form of repayment. I sometimes wish you both had more disagreements, just for those moments." "Well," she said, "you know I love him to death, but when he pisses me off like today, I can't help it. I need revenge sex, just so he's not the winner." As I listened to this conversation, the realization that she had cheated on me twice in the last 6 years of our marriage and was planning to do it again tonight brought me back to the state I was in when I started telling this story. She could say all she wanted about how much she loved me to death, but her actions proved otherwise. She slept with Phil to get back at me, to keep me from winning, as she put it. That's not love. That's a selfish, indifferent entity, and it caused all the changes I mentioned. Whether it's right or not, that conversation destroyed me and my love. Don't tell me I'm foolish because I won't listen. This is what it is, and I knew I no longer loved her. Oh, I almost cried over such a loss, but it was all over already. I waited for some time, wondering how long it would be before they headed to the room. And very soon I heard him say, "So, Susie, are you ready to do it again?" I could almost see the smirk on her face. I knew she'd be there because I heard the words she said to him, and she always smirked when she said them. "I am ready to please you in bed until you feel ready, and then you can pleasure me." Then she smiled. "I might even take him home and let Larry lick the rest of your juice tonight. He'll be so drunk, he won't even know the difference." Phil flared up at this. "Girl, what a nasty thing to say. I would never want Larry to pay attention to my leftovers." Fortunately for them, they got up and headed to the elevators. I was ready to kill. Perhaps I was lucky because, I think, I could have seriously harmed their health. Sometime later, I followed them to the lobby. I couldn't tell which floor they stopped at, So I approached the porter and asked him to call Phil Major's room. He hung up. I asked them to call his room again, and when he picked up the phone, I said, "Well, I thought this was 312, tell me. Are you trying to deceive me? Because this is 312, isn't it?" The phone rang 3 times before he picked up, and I asked in a muffled voice, "Is this room 312? He replied, "No, this is not 312. Why the hell are you calling this number at this time? You stupid drunken bastard. This is not room 312. It's room 422, and if you call here again, I'll ask the manager to call the police." He slammed down the phone receiver. Anyway, who's calling me a stupid bastard now? I think the dumb bastard is the one who just gave an angry and dangerous husband the room number of the room where he plans to sleep with his wife. Let's take a vote. Who's the stupid bastard here? I took the elevator to the 4th floor and walked down the hallway to room 422. I listened at the door until I heard that they were in full swing, then knocked on the door and I heard him shout, "What the hell?" And I really enjoyed that because I knew I was about to ruin his fucking party. I stepped away from the peephole so he couldn't see, and when he cracked the door open, I slammed into it with such force that the safety chain ripped off the door jamb, and the door flew open. There on the bed lay my beautiful cheating wife, naked as the day she was born. When I burst into the room, she screamed, her face turning completely pale. I'm surprised she didn't faint. Oh God, no, oh God, oh God, no. Phil finally recovered from the shock when I barged into the room and yelled at me, "Larry, get your ass out of my room. I'm calling security." Remember what I said about a stupid fuck? Well, I hit that stupid bastard with one well-placed blow to the solar plexus, and he fell. He didn't move for several minutes. I had no more problems with him. "Susie, you lying cheating bitch. I know everything. I heard you at the bar, and I know it all. Don't bother coming back home tonight. It would be a big mistake on your part." "Oh God, no, Larry. Let me come back home. I can explain. It means nothing to me. I love you. Oh God, no." "You heard me, crap. Don't make the second biggest mistake of your life, and don't come back home. It won't end well for you. And yes, you can take it as a threat." I turned and walked out the door. Honestly, I was surprised at how calm I could be right now. I wanted to kill them both minutes earlier, but delivering just one blow to that stupid bastard showed incredible restraint on my part. I know I was pretty harsh with her words, but things could have been much worse. Reaching my car, I sat in it and just stayed there for a while, trying to calm down even more. I also decided to wait a few minutes just to see if the police would show up or if Susie would leave with Phil. About 15 minutes later, Phil left the hotel, got into his car, and drove away. A few minutes after he left, Patty appeared again, and Susie came out and got into her car. I was at least glad they didn't stay to fool around in the hotel room after I left. Not that the damage hadn't already been done, but that would add insult to injury, or as they say, pour oil on the fire. That gave me an idea that I went home and went to bed. I don't even know what time the phone rang, and the caller ID showed it was Patty. "Larry, I know you're upset about Susie and don't want her to come back home, but I wanted to call and tell you that she's staying with us and Dave, so you don't have to worry about her." "Patty, I wasn't going to worry about her anymore. I don't care about her anymore. You didn't need to wake me up. By the way, what time is it now?" "It's 3 in the morning, Larry, and you can't tell me you don't care. I know you love Susie, and she loves you. She's here, and she's crying her eyes out for how stupid she was tonight, and she wants you to forgive her and let her come back home." "Patty, she can't come back home. Ask her if her stupidity matches those other 2 times she slept with Phil before tonight." "Oh God, no," Patty said after I hung up. "I don't think she knew about the other times Susie slept with that jerk. I was lucky that I don't get bad hangovers, and besides, I stopped drinking pretty early in the evening, so even though I was very tired, I was up around 8 in the morning." By 10 o'clock, I was ready to confront Susie. I called Patty's home and told her that Susie could come back home if she wanted to. I stood on the driveway when she arrived a few minutes later. Dave and Patty followed her to our house. I'm sure they were there to make sure I didn't cause her any physical harm. When Susie got out of her car, her eyes were wide open, and she asked, "Larry, what's this mess in our front yard?" Susie, this is all that would remind you of me. Everything you ever gave me. Everything I ever gave you. These are all the photos from our courtship and our 6 years of marriage. I can't think of a single thing left in the house that would remind you of me. I even put out the old furniture so you could go buy new, like you wanted. And lastly this, and I lifted our wedding photo. I walked over to the end table next to my chair and placed the photo on it. I took a few steps back to the driveway and tossed a lit match into the gasoline trail I had poured over all these items. It caught fire, and the flames quickly raced towards the pile of memories about me. It wasn't long before everything was engulfed in flames. It was a hellish bonfire. There was little left except ashes and burnt furniture frames. I looked at my wife, who was clearly in shock, and said, "You win, Susie. I heard you telling Phil you never wanted me to win. I hope it was all worth it. Our marriage is over. You can take everything else. I want nothing from this marriage. I just hope I won't remember you either. You'll hear the details from my lawyer." A few minutes later, when I heard the sound of approaching sirens from the other side of the street, a police car pulled up and 2 officers approached to ask what had happened. Within a couple of minutes, the fire department arrived to extinguish what remained of the smoldering mass. The gasoline had done its job, and the pile turned into ashes and charred gravel in a matter of moments. I was just burning the remnants of a marriage, officers. I apologize for any trouble I caused. Needless to say, they arrested me. As they escorted me into the patrol car, I glanced at Susie and saw her crying. I spent a couple of days in jail, and they requested a psychiatrist to assess my sanity. Surprisingly, they found me to be of sound mind, distraught and devastated, but sane. I think they would have released me earlier, but they wanted to observe me for a couple of days just to be sure. I posted bail and went to retrieve my car from the parking lot near my office. All the things I wanted to leave behind were in the car. It was mostly my clothes and a few other personal items. I drove to the nearest motel and booked a room for a few days until I could find an apartment to rent. A few weeks later, I had settled in completely and started moving forward with life. My court case began, and I pleaded guilty to all charges and was fined $5,000 plus court costs. It was a small price to pay to end my broken marriage. Susie contested the divorce and continued leaving me voicemails on my mobile phone. She begged me to talk to her, forgive her, because it meant nothing to her, to take her back. I left one message on our home phone when I knew she would be at work. I said, "Susie, you tell me it meant nothing to you, but it meant everything to me. Do you understand? It meant everything to me. Goodbye." I didn't hear from her again. The divorce did go through, and I gave her everything she wanted. I just wanted to be done with her. Phil's wife caught wind of all this, divorced him, and really took him to the cleaners. It seems Susie wasn't the only wife Phil comforted when they fought with their husbands. A couple of weeks after I barged into the hotel room and found him with his wife, I ran into Phil at that same bar. I think I must have surprised him because he didn't have time to get up and run. I leaned on his shoulder as he sat on the bar stool and said I was almost sure if he kept gallivanting around town, he'd eventually get into a serious accident. When his divorce was final, he started liquidating what was left of his assets, and soon his absence in town became apparent. Oddly enough, not many people really missed him. Well, I secretly hoped he'd stay in town. I bump into Susie occasionally on the streets, and each time she tells me how sorry she is and asks if I'll call her to talk. I just nod and walk away, and to this day, I haven't called her, but she keeps asking. Who knows, maybe someday I'll give her a call.